France. Is it possible to live in Montenegro without knowing Serbian? You've probably seen many ads about immigrating to some Slavic country, Czechia, Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro, claiming that the language there is similar to Russian, almost the same as Russian, that there's no language barrier at all, and you don't need to learn the language. That's all a lie. The language, yes, it is relatively similar to Russian. That is, there are a certain number of Russian words, but still it is a foreign language. To know it well, you have to study it. On its own, in most cases, you won't just pick it up. Well, there are exceptions. The exceptions, frankly, that I know of are probably only two. For example, someone studies at a Serbian school or has a local wife, and accordingly, either at school or at home, they are constantly communicating in the language, and somehow, over time, they gradually pick it up on their own. Other cases where someone has lived there for 5 or 10 years and just learned the language by themselves, honestly, I haven't come across that. That's it. Whether to learn the language or not is a decision everyone makes for themselves. I'll put it this way. Most Russians living in Montenegro don't worry about this. They either don't know the language at all or know it very poorly, and they don't stress about it. I mean, laziness is a natural human condition. Nobody likes to study. And if people feel that they don't have a strong need for Serbian, that they can somehow get by without it, then they probably take advantage of that. What's the difference between Serbian and, say, Czech, Bulgarian, or, for example, a language that's more difficult for us, like English, French, or Turkish? Well, I was recently in Turkey, and I don't understand anything there at all. I mean, sure, if you stay at a hotel where you're lucky enough that someone speaks Russian, you can communicate, but otherwise, I don't understand them at all. In other words, Turkish is absolutely nothing like Russian. But if you go to Montenegro or some other Serbian-speaking country, you won't have that feeling, because you can get by on simple topics even without knowing Serbian. There's a certain set of words that are either exactly the same as in Russian or very similar. You might not know these words, maybe you can't say them yourself, but if you hear them, you'll understand their meaning. And that's the difference, is the difference between languages that are similar or relatively similar to Russian and those that are not, like English, French, Turkish, or others. So that's why really on some basic, simple topics like how to get somewhere, how much does it cost, give me this so you can really get by without knowing Serbian. And you basically don't need the Serbian language for that. That's why it's really easy for tourists in Montenegro. And for immigrants who come and don't plan to discuss any complicated topics, it's possible to live like that too. Many people live there for many years without learning the language, and they don't know it. This is entirely possible. For example, if it were Turkey, England, or Germany, it would be difficult, but here it's possible because there really is a certain shared vocabulary. But if you want to talk about professional topics or even everyday matters that are more complex, like, God forbid, you get seriously ill and need to explain something unusual to a doctor in detail, in such a situation you either need to know the language, which means you have to make an effort to learn it or bring a translator with you. Dragging translators around everywhere, first of all, costs money, and secondly, and more importantly, it's just inconvenient. I've seen this situation many times. For example, at the CRB, the Central Registry, where people come by themselves probably because they don't want to pay anyone to open companies on their own. And they poke at an online translator, like, I don't know what they were typing in there. Probably something like, give me a list of documents or something along those lines. They tell them, we don't communicate like that. Come to us with a translator. He stands there unable to say anything on his own. So the situation here is a bit more complicated. It's not like in a store where you just say, give me cucumbers. Here, you need to find out, for example, whether I've filled out the articles of association correctly. That's it. They say, come with a translator and we'll talk. Or learn Serbian yourself. In other words, well, that's just how it is. So professional communication without knowing Serbian, in other words, working without knowing Serbian is very difficult. To run a business, you also need to learn Serbian. There are people who start doing business, and not even the simplest kind. For example, they open a restaurant. Gradually, they still end up learning the language because they need it. But if someone comes here and just wants to live for a certain number of years, maybe even for a long time, and doesn't have any particular goal, she works online, for example, and just goes for walks and shops here, then in principle, you can live in Montenegro quite well without knowing the language. Although, in my opinion, that might not be entirely right. Thank you all for your attention. Goodbye, everyone.